Hello, everyone. Welcome to the For Animals for Earth podcast slash videocast. We are trying a new software today, so I want to just kind of tell everybody that right off the bat so that if this is weird, that's why. But we're going to test this out and see how this works. So, this is episode number 36, which is how stereotyping hurts the environmental movement with Jay. So Jay is my friend who is here joining us. Hi, Jay.
Hi.
And Jay hosts a podcast as well. That's how I know her. We are in a podcasting mastermind together with a group called Wit and Wire, which we both absolutely love. And she is the host of the In Omnia Paratus podcast, which I hope you will all go check out because she and her co host, Angela, put on this really fun show all about the quarter life crisis, basically, right? It's all about how to navigate post college life, turning into an adult. And, it's funny, Jay, I was just thinking, even that word quarter life crisis, like I remember what a big part of my life that was. And I remember identifying it, reading a book called The Quarter Life Crisis when I was probably about 25 and thinking, oh my gosh, this is me. This like perfectly explains what's going on in my life right now. And I think looking back, I think that it was a lot of what pushed me into wanting to be more focused on animal welfare was going through that part of my life. But so anyway, did you hear that? I heard that too. It's like a sound of some sort.
I'm so sorry. They're
Oh,
doing
okay.
construction
No, no problem.
outside. I am I will try to mute it whenever
Don't worry.
possible.
I think that it's funny because I was like, that sounds very far away. Anyway, all right. So welcome, Jay, and in Omnia Paratus podcast is where you guys can find her. So our subject for today is talking about stereotypes within sustainability, and this is something that I have been thinking about for a long time, probably for at least the past year or so. I often have thoughts swirling in my head around how sustainability is really very different for every individual on this earth. And I just honestly don't feel like we talk about that enough. We talk about, all of the different things that we can do, but I just haven't heard many conversations where people talk about the difference in what they do and how those different things are all making a difference. And so Jay, I know, has also been thinking a lot about this, and she and I ended up talking a few months ago about how we both wished we had more conversations in our lives that really dug into how we're all so different and how making a difference for animals in the earth can truly be a very different journey and a different story for everybody. And so today's show, it's a little bit of a different format than what I've done in the past, in which Jay and I are going to just try out having an honest conversation about how both of our lives have formed us into who we are as stewards of wanting to help humanity and animals and the earth, and also sharing our perspectives, but in a way that we would like to continue this conversation more after today. And there's a couple of ways that we want to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's go ahead and get started like in our conversation. Um, let's start with in your life, Jay. I wonder if there are things that you have noticed, if there's anything that sticks out right off the top of your head as being one of the main reasons that you have a passion now for doing something to help the environment or help animals.
I feel like part of growing up is just kind of when you know more, you want to do more. So for me, one of my life goals has always to been has always been to be a parent one day. And hearing people around my age and a little bit older second guess that because of what our world could come to has definitely opened my eyes in a way that other things haven't. And it's not that I haven't cared, but I think it really takes a personal note for people to kind of get that really big fire and wanting to advocate and wanting to put their time, money, and effort and use their platforms to speak on such things, because without that, it's all kind of a concept like, we're running out of water, we're running out of fresh air, carbon, our atmosphere is doing this, but it's like, there's so many things going on systemically, globally. It can be very overwhelming as a concept, but when it hits closer to home, I feel that's when you start implementing changes and therefore can influence other people by your own actions.
I love how you just worded that like so eloquently, and I absolutely agree. I think there is something in each of us that if we've gotten to a point that we want to do something to make a difference, there's something that triggered that or caused that. And you mentioned children. So is there a lot of conversation happening? I mean, so I will say, okay, I have children, right? So there's a lot of conversation happening among parents that what do we do? Like, how do we help our kids grow up being good stewards of the earth and treating other humans and other animals with compassion? But there's also a big fear of what is the earth even going to look like for them when my children are my age, or when I'm, my grandma's age and my children, yeah, I guess then they're my age, but then I have potentially grandchildren or great grandchildren. What's the world going to look like for them? Is that the type of conversation that you're talking about? Just kind of that fear of what it might look like? And are people considering not having children because of that?
Yeah, so the first time I heard something like this, it was a relatively prominent political figure around my age was doing an Instagram live and brought this point up about, I don't even know if I want to have kids. And then I saw, because of that comment and the fact that she said it, a lot of news media kind of picked it up and was like, is this being dramatic? Is this being this? And then kind of doing not enough, because it kind of was very overwhelming, but doing a little bit of research into what the world could look like in 15, 20 years, because it's not just, you don't want to just have the kids and then be like, we'll figure it out after. Once they're here, God willing, they're going to live a long, healthy life. But if the world they're coming into is already decaying at such a rapid rate that they might not have that, are you really giving those humans the best shot rather than fulfilling a personal need?
Wow, I feel like,
Sorry, that's really
no,
deep.
I was just going to say, I feel like that is a really profound way to look at it and a very selfless way to look at it. I don't know how many people really think about, like you said, just jumping in versus saying, okay, well, like, do I feel pretty confident that I can set my children up with a bright future before making the decision to have children? I mean, I feel like that's just really commendable, and I feel like really really selfless in thinking that way. And like you said, it's kind of hard because it talks about the problem, but it doesn't really provide a lot of good solutions, does it? It's like then you start thinking about all these different reasons that maybe we shouldn't have children, but then how do you come to terms with what is a solution? And do you find that people, it just kind of fuels the fire for, we all need to do something?
Definitely did personally. Like, to preface it, as much as I have been having those thoughts, I'm someone who's wanted a big family, cheaper by the dozen style since I was a very young child. So it would need to be a very serious internal thing for me to not have kids. I really want to have children. However, that's why I'm personally trying to do what I can in research environmentalism and sustainability, because I want kids and I want to have a planet that they can exist on, as opposed to I'd rather find a way so that I can have kids successfully than to just give up and be like, well, I'd rather live my life the way I am today, as opposed to cutting back on laundry, looking into sustainable consumer options, looking into other things. I'd rather put in kind of the work and invest now so that I can invest in my kids later down the road. So that's the kind of the conversations I've been looking in, but I feel that I am known to be very type A, very perfectionist, and when I kind of go down a rabbit hole, I can very easily get overwhelmed, and sustainability is a very large rabbit hole. As you know, when we discussed it on my podcast, there were a lot of points, a lot of articles that we'd all pull for. And the more you look into one, it's like, oh, well, water. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, it's not just water, it's water and then carbon going into the atmosphere. And it's not just carbon going into the atmosphere, it's the water to make meat. And like, one that really discouraged me, and it can sound pretty superficial at the beginning, is I'm someone who personally prefers the taste of almond milk in their coffee to begin with. I'm not a big regular milk drinker, big ice cream fan, but I actually like the way almond milk tastes better. And I remember when there was this phase of people being like, almond milk takes almost as much water comparable to like regular milk. So yes, you're not using the dairy, but then you're using so much more water to get the almond milk. And then it's like, it was a chart of like all of the non-dairy milks and their water content usage. So it's, you try to switch one thing and then there's another environmental factor equally as important to need to consider. And so it's very easy to try to find simple, small solutions, but also when those simple, small solutions also kind of reverberate in another area of sustainability, it becomes even more overwhelming.
Yeah. That's so true. And I think that having that anchor of your why, like your reason that you started caring in the first place, I can see how that is something that can help carry you through. It's like for me, I think it's animals. It started with me when I was 3 on the farm. And ever since then, that's a very like animal cruelty, and trying to stop animal cruelty is kind of like my strongest why among everything else. And it does help to have something that you kind of fall back and you go, okay, wait, I don't want to give up. I want to at least try. But like you said, it is so hard on all of these different factors. And you think you found something and you're doing it, and it's like, yeah, this is making a difference. And then there's it. I feel like on most initiatives, I find something. If I wanted to, I could Google and find a reason that I shouldn't do that thing. And so I have really constantly gone back and forth on this balance in my personal life of like, when I learn new information, deciding, okay, am I going to change what I'm doing, or am I going to keep what I'm doing? But how do I make sure I do one of those two things instead of just giving up and kind of saying there's no point. Yeah. So I love that you've shared that, because I really think that's something that probably everybody relates to that is going through trying to make a difference. So recently there's been a lot of, I guess what I would say, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, there's been a lot more awareness of anti-Asian sentiment here in the US. And I think from what I've heard from friends over the years that it's not a new thing, but I do think in the past week it's much more well known. And you and I have talked about this a little bit, and how just I think stereotypes against Asian people intersect with sustainability, and how that intersection can continue to feed anti-Asian sentiment. And I thought maybe we could talk about that a little bit today, because I know you identify as an Asian woman, and I would love, well, as an American Asian woman, right? And actually, I would love for you to even just correct me on those two things and to just share a little bit about yourself and your culture, and then a little bit about what you and I have talked about, where you think that sustainability specifically could be hurting just the relationship between American Asian people and other Americans.
Definitely. So I say Asian American. I do know some people who say American first. I think it's a personal preference thing. I guess for me, I say Asian American due to the fact that if I'm walking down the street, you're gonna know I'm Asian before you know I'm American. So that's kind of just the way I see it. And additionally, I mean, I think this is obvious, but just I'm used to disclaiming for my own podcast. I am not speaking for every Asian in America. I know there is a diverse group of thought, and frankly, when Brandy asked me to be on this podcast, I did my own research into Asian Americans and sustainability because I really did only know my experience. But I am adopted into a predominantly white family. So I myself am Asian American, but I don't necessarily have a quote unquote normal Asian American experience, which is why I wanted to do some research into people who are more culturally involved and have been brought up with that, because I think my view is not the typical one. So trying to make sure I'm even educating myself on the Asian experience is also very important. I think the thing with Asian stereotypes, particularly that's so hard, is they haven't been looked at negatively because they're not very negative stereotypes. Some of the ones I come up with, they eat rice. Okay, that's just the thing. And then they're good at math. I don't know anyone who's like, ooh, you're good at math, that makes you lame, like that. And then also, there have been a lot of charts I've seen in past years where it's like they kind of take, for every dollar a white male makes, and then they rank everyone else. Asian women are right under white men, and Asian men are slightly above white men. So another stereotype that is not a harmful or a bad one in society. It looks like something that, look what Asians are doing. They're setting themselves up. They're succeeding. That's where their standards are. And what I think can be harmful about that is I think, if anything has kind of been shown us over the last 5-6 years in sentiment, we have very difficult time, Americans or humans, I don't know, have a very difficult time holding multiple things to be true. So when one of the stereotypes against Asians is they're financially set, they're able to pull themselves up from their bootstraps, look at them succeeding and thriving in business and tech and STEM. When it comes to other comments such as name calling and microaggressions, it can very easily be dismissed because it's like, well, on a large scale, Asians are doing fine. The model minority myth. Asians are fine. Asians are succeeding. And they're not really, and kind of the why isn't really looked into as, well, why are Asians succeeding at higher rates than other groups? Or what barriers do Asians not have? Or what about their culture is different? So I feel like all of those factors can kind of add into anti-Asian sentiment and why it's been harder for people to see until now. I think it does, like we said earlier, it takes something personal. And I think watching what happened in Atlanta kind of shook a lot of people. And specifically in terms of sustainability, it's an Asian stereotype, which has been proven false, but I think it's a good example of how Asians eat dogs, which again has been proven false, is not a thing. However, it's a great example to me of culture clashing and kind of moral high grounding. I I don't think it's right to eat dogs. I would never, but it's also, why are we not as outraged for the cows or for pigs or for other animals? Kind of similarly, when straws became a big topic, the sea turtles, everyone went all out for sea turtles. And it's like acknowledging not that any one animal is less or more valuable, because in our ecosystem, you shouldn't be ranking animals just because, but because you have a dog at home, that is what's going to outrage you, as opposed to factory farming and other things. So to me, that's just kind of one of the more negative stereotypes, specifically in sustainability, that we should look a little bit more internally about, and how, no, I would never eat a dog, but what else am I eating and condoning going on in this country?
Yeah, there's so much in what you just said. Let me start here from the end. So yeah, I love that point about dog dog meat and eating dogs, because that's a conversation that I have actually had a lot in my life as well. I don't know why it has come up so much. I think it came up more when we lived in Japan, and it's not, eating dog is not a common Japanese thing, but I do think it just being more common in China and Korea, I think maybe it just came up more in conversation there, probably also from friends traveling over there and coming back to Tokyo or whatever. But it's interesting because I always had the same thought. I was like, well, why is it bad to eat dog, but it's not bad to eat pig or cow or horse, like all of these other meats. And I think the point that you made, I just really, really love, and I want to highlight, and I think we should talk about more, is that what we believe and what we see as wrong, and I think, like you said, it can be a very, very strong moral feeling inside someone that something is wrong. But I think peeling back that layer and recognizing that that comes from our own life and our own conditioning. So if we have a dog as a pet, we're going to see a dog very differently than a pig that we may not have as a pet. And then the next person who has a pig as a pet is going to see a pig very differently than a cow. It's so different based on the way that we have grown up and what we have seen, and just what, even I guess as an adult, we choose to bring into our lives, that frames so much what our view is on what is, you mentioned these words, I think, the moral high ground. And I think that really can cause like such a strong division between people when we feel like our moral high ground is here, and this person's is over here, and how dare they do that. And it's like, you can know the feeling, because even for me, with so much passion around animals, I can know the feeling in some of those conversations I have, where a friend says, well, I eat dog all the time, and I could feel it in me, like, ooh. But also trying to like understand that, well, yeah, but why is that different than eating pig or whatever? And just trying to, what is it? I guess just trying to open our minds to notice that other people have different viewpoints based on what they've come from and what they've seen. Um, the beginning then also of what you said, I feel like is really important, which is, we're kind of talking about like, oh, there are trends, or there are certain things that seem common for Asian people, or certain things that seem common for Asian American people, and certain things that seem common for Americans that are non-Asian people. And we're kind of like acting like there's these different trends that can be believed in, which we call stereotypes. And I I often find with myself that I do think, stereotypes are just something that I think we probably automatically do as humans that help us kind of navigate life. But I kind of feel like they cause more harm then they do good, because it does make us stop thinking of people as individual people and thinking of people as groups of people, and just assuming that everyone who happens to have that characteristic is going to represent that. And so I really appreciate, that part of what you said in the beginning as well. And is that something also, do you find this type of conversation to be something that you're having often, around just how complex individuals are and how there's so much that makes us up and what our values would be because of that?
I There are conversations that happen just as one gets older, kind of with that whole quarter life crisis. What am I? What's my purpose here? What do I want to be doing? What are my goals? From kindergarten through high school, at least in America, it's very structured. You're very set on a path. You go from elementary school to middle school to high school, and then now, probably, because right now trade schools are not valued the way they should be in this country, you go to college. You need to go to university. You need a degree. And then now you need a master's and a PhD and everything. Like a master's is the new bachelor's degree. And after you're out of that pipeline, you're just kind of supposed to get it. And people act like, well, you'll figure it out. Like, I figured it out. So I think that is difficult. And I think quarantine has taught us all, ideally, kind of to be more self reflective. And I think intersectionality is a term that I'm sure has been around, but I only sort of started hearing and using. And I think that with everything that went on in 2020, it's caused a lot of conversations, comfortable, uncomfortable, internal, external, about these issues and how they all culminate. And something that I know you were saying about kind of seeing people as individuals and versus groups, I feel can be a bit of a double-edged sword where we are in society. Because yes, I am my own individual and I have my own Asian American experience. However, for instance, when I'm walking down the street and someone has a negative stereotypes about Asians, I can't stop being like, wait, I was adopted, I grew up in an American household, I have these things, like, it's not me because I look Asian, and if that's what's in their head, that's there. So it's kind of about appreciating and balancing where you are an individual and kind of doing what you can while also having to acknowledge where our systems have failed us and how we can work within them and outside of them to push us all forward.
Yeah, and I agree with you that one nice thing to come out of the quarantine is that I do think this is so much more of a conversation. And to your point, a lot of the systems that are there and the stereotypes are coming out more and more well known, right? Because people are at least open to the conversation and open to hearing feelings. And I kind of feel like, I don't know if you're seeing this as well, but I feel like people are sharing their feelings more easily now as well. It's almost like the world's platform has opened up a little bit to recognize that we all have feelings and everyone hurts when these stereotypes are put against them, and being able to like share those out loud and then other people can hear them. I also feel like that's kind of changed over the past year too.
Definitely. I think for a lot of people of color, again, I'm not speaking for everyone, but from the group of people of color I've surrounded myself with social media who I've heard, when you're in predominantly white spaces, there is a bit of assimilation that goes on. And it's something that you and your POC community just or BIPOC community know you just have to do. You just know that's how you move through spaces. You know it's how you're safe to move through spaces. So when something like this comes on, and luckily I think a lot of non-POCs are kind of asking and being willing to hear and listen, their POC friends are like, oh, you deal with that? It's like, Well, I do. I just never brought it up because it wasn't, I didn't think it was something we would talk about. It was just understood. One of the movies I watched that I know is based on a great book, The Hate You Give, about a girl in LA whose friend gets shot by the police, police brutality kind of thing, protesting young people. But in the trailer, she talks about code switching, and I had never heard what code switching was. She was a young black girl. And it's the way that particularly black communities move and speak differently throughout white communities. And if you've only seen a black person in a dominantly white space, you might not have any clue about the struggles, the microaggressions, things they're facing, because until recently, it didn't seem like people outside of the communities facing the oppression were willing and or capable of having those conversations.
Can I ask you, in the conversations that you've had with your friends, were these conversations happening in the past a lot? So I guess, yeah, my question is, were the conversations happening just not with white people? Or is it all of this conversation is becoming a conversation more recently? I'm just curious.
Um, I think, not to be super diplomatic here, I think it's both. I think it depends if it was brought up or not. I think personally, one of the things that I've had conversations with over the years is the way certain POCs respond to the question, "Oh, what are you?" In my personal life experience, I never took offense to that question, nor did I understand it. I think it was a bit naive on my part, and I would always respond right back to the typically non-POC person, "Oh, like, where are you from?" And if they said American, I would always continue to ask questions, because in my brain, unless you are Native American, your family goes back to another country, and I'm curious about the heritage of that other country your family's from. However, some of my other friends who are POC, that question holds a lot more weight because it implies a lack of validity of being in the space, which I was fortunate to not experience in that way. So I have had these conversations, and I think it depends on the community. My mother has always been very active for the environment, for civil rights. She was the first girl to wear jeans at her high school and got like suspended for it. There are plenty of white Americans who I know do care and who are educating themselves and who are part of that conversation. I think what the shift is learning to uplift those voices instead of just kind of, I think there's kind of two sides to this of, is it more effective to uplift the POC voices or for white people to go back to their spaces of dominantly white people and help them hear it in a more palatable way? And I don't think there's a right answer. Similarly to sustainability, I don't think there is a right answer. I don't know if Brene Brown coined this quote or where it comes from, but done is better than perfect. Effort is better than non-effort, and you might not get it right. However, not getting it right means an attempt was made, and I hope we can all show each other grace during this time of transition, because the world literally is on fire. At least California is.
Isn't that true? Well, and yeah, it's like this just shows, like, I feel like you and I could sit here and talk for another 3 hours about the intricacies of this and the depth of it, and I'm also finding myself wanting to do that. And I don't know how many other people are out there wanting to do it, but something that Jay and I are going to do at least once, maybe more, is host a conversation on Clubhouse for those of you who are listening and are watching and want to be a part of the conversation too, so that we can all talk to each other. Because right now, like Jay and I can talk to each other and exchange thoughts. And like I said, forever we probably could. But also, I know I want even more people in the conversation. And I think you do too. And
Definitely.
and so that is something that we do want to invite everybody to, is to join us on Clubhouse for the conversation. And we did not pick a specific time yet, I just realized. So you can follow both of us if you are on Clubhouse, and it'll be sometime next week. So I'm on Clubhouse at Brandy Heidi Montague or Brandy H Montague. And how can they follow you, Jay?
That is a great question. I'm not sure what my Clubhouse.
Well, so come follow me, and then I'll help you find Jay.
Yes. Yeah, I have so many usernames. I grew up with Neopets and a MySpace and like a Totally Spies page and like all of those old like Club Penguin that I'm sure I have a user for somewhere. I can't keep track of them all.
You know, it's funny because I just tried to change my Clubhouse to For Animals for Earth, because when I signed up, I wasn't really thinking about it, but I really want I mean, most of my social media is For Animals for Earth, but it's too big, it's too long, and I can't change it. So anyway, you guys can find me, Brandy Heidi Montague. We'll find you to the right place. And also, something else that I realized that I have available here with the podcast is that you can call in and you can leave a voice memo. And actually, probably people could call in live too, but I don't know how to do that. So maybe we'll figure that out at some point. But you can call and you can leave a voice memo. And I would love if anyone is listening to this conversation and would like to share, like, let's make an easy question. Like, what has influenced you the most in your life as it relates to sustainability and animal welfare? You know, like, what do you feel like has influenced you most? And if anybody wants to leave a voice memo about that, you go to Anchor. Let me get it right. Anchor.fm/For Animals for Earth. And it's very easy there to leave a voice memo. So if anybody is interested in joining in the conversation, those are two options. I would really, really love you to come join us on Clubhouse for the conversation. And if you don't have Clubhouse, which I know a lot of people don't, you could join in with the voice memo, which is a fun thing that we can try too. I know for me, I want to have more conversations, and the podcast format gives you like a facet of that, but it doesn't give the full ability for us to really dig into all of these different topics of where sustainability intersects A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like, there's, you know, all these different places how sustainability intersects that I think could be really, really fulfilling conversations. You know, you mentioned that your mom was really into environmental activism. So that is also probably a piece of what has fed you being interested in it, I would think, as well. I wonder if you'll share one idea from what you've seen in your life, one simple idea that you think people could try if they want to make a difference for animals in the environment.
I think one of the simplest switches people can make is to deal with the packaging of their products, not in terms of when you get a box shipped to you, but the forms, such as like shampoo bars, bamboo toothbrushes, glass instead of plastic, paper instead of plastic, all of those kind of things for whatever products you're normally buying. Bringing bags to the grocery store with you is a very simple one. But my one addendum to this, which I know we mentioned on my podcast too, that I think is the important part, use what you have already first before you want to make those sustainable switches, because then you're wasting money and product that is now already in your possession. So when I go to make sustainable switches, I make sure, okay, I like using this face wash. However, it's plastic. It comes in a bunch of plastic. It happens that I love one that's greener and cleaner, and it comes in a paper box, but the bottle is glass. So because I love it and it's also good for the environment, I just continue to buy that one. So I think it's using whatever you have and then look for small switches to be more sustainable, because especially here, everything comes down to the dollar. And if everyone is switching to brands with more glass or more paper or recycled packaging or ethically made, more brands are going to invest there.
Yeah, and I feel like we're already seeing it happen. It's like you're already starting to see that shift happen where, gosh, I feel like just in the past 2 years, the shampoo bars and, like you said, the bamboo toothbrush, just all of this different type of packaging, I feel like has just skyrocketed in availability over the past 2 years. And I think, you know, we influence with our dollars, we influence like the big brands, which I think is often what we think about, but we also influence the middle guy, making it easier for the middle guy who provides packaging to provide more options that then help the little guys as well. And I think sometimes we miss that part, but it really does, it really helps with like suppliers that can also help little brands, which I think is really, really great too, as well as just pushing the big brands that maybe don't want to change to change, right? So,
That's definitely true. And also, when you do shop local and shop small, especially as what the pandemic has seen, I've seen a bunch of tweets of, I had an order from my small business this week so I could go grocery shopping for my family. Having your impact also local helps sustainability in terms of packaging, in terms of where the ingredients are sourced from farmers markets, from local farmers. Like, I have family who probably would be vegan if they could, but for health reasons isn't able to. They only buy meat from this one very small farmer who's close by, who's able to do it super as ethically and well as they can. But that's still bigger than buying into factory farming and getting fresh eggs. So even if for whatever lifestyle value choices you're unable to go vegan or vegetarian, looking to those still more local options will still be better than mass purchasing.
yeah, for sure. And I feel like also sometimes the hurdle to that seems harder than it actually is. It's like sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to find a local farmer? But just going to the farmer's market and starting to ask, people who are selling there, you may realize, at least I feel like I've seen this in my life, that hurdle is not as big as it seemed. All of a sudden, I met somebody, and 5 minutes later, I have a place that I can buy locally that I feel so much better about. But, a half an hour earlier, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'll ever find a local whatever, Um, yeah, yeah, I really love that you've shared that. I also think that a wonderful byproduct of that is that it brings our communities together, which now that things are opening back up, I really hope that people will start to find a lot more of those strong relationships in the people around them, in your true neighbors. What's the best way if someone would like to contact you? What's the best way to find you? Is it through your podcast?
Probably through the podcast or through our Instagram,
What's your
millennials, social media. It's at In Omnia Pod because In Omnia Prodis was taken, unfortunately.
So add in Omniapod on Instagram. Okay, perfect. And yeah, and then the podcast is called In Omnia Paratus, and Jay mentioned this a couple of times, but she and I and her co-host Angela did a podcast episode together a few weeks ago, all about this kind of same topic, but a little bit of a different lens about intersections between sustainability and ableism, sustainability and classism, just talking about lots of different ideas that we could come up with in that conversation that we might be able to try, or anyone listening. So go follow Jay's podcast so that you can see that when it comes out, and I'll link to it in the show notes once it's out too. And yeah, is there anything else that you want to share?
I think, well, first, thank you for having me on. This was my first time guesting. It's definitely a different muscle than hosting. And I think just reiterating that impact versus intent. So sometimes your intent is there and the impact misses. And it's rather than taking it too personally, look at it as a challenge to do better so that next time the intent hits and matches the impact. Kind of going back, done is better than perfect. If the one thing you can do is remember to bring your bags, I'm a big Trader Joe's family, is to bring your bags to Trader Joe's now that you can start doing that again. That's still more than getting the paper bags you're doing. So doing anything is better than doing nothing. And I think if you know you're doing it for the right reasons and you're trying to kind of silence the voices who are telling you, well, what about the water? What about the animals? What about this? What about electricity? What about gardening? What about everything? Just take what you can for where you are and know that it's one thing that you're doing that is a choice to be doing rather than a passive decision.
Such wise words. Thank you so much. I want to leave us on that because it's just the perfect way to head out. So thank you so much, Jay, for being on here. I'm so excited that this was your first interview. I don't think I knew that. Maybe I knew that, but I'm really, really excited that I got to be a part of that, and I'm really thankful that you came on today and spent your time and your heart sharing with us. So thank you.